Am I? Am I here? I don't know. All right, says excellent. All right, I didn't get to stream on Friday. Well, first of all, good evening. I am here, as you can tell from the fact that I actually have a background. Well, you may not know. I'm at fabled Studio B, somewhere in the hills, deep in the hills, up country from my usual haunt. I'm actually here by myself. The family's not here. I've got relatives coming. My cousins are coming, and we're gonna do a bunch of board games. They're not tabletop role playing gamers, not yet anyway. But they're big. They've gotten to be big board gamers. It's kind of funny because they're older than I am, and I remember one of my first experiences of seeing D&D, role playing games at all, but basically D&D. Seeing D&D was seeing bits of their setup. I think I remember just very vague memories of visiting their house and seeing one of them, I think, had, or maybe even both of them had some D&D stuff, but they fell away from the hobby ages and ages ago, just when I was picking it up, which I guess unfortunately for me, since we never got a chance to really overlap in that regard. And then they're both older than me, but my oldest of the cousins actually, hey Krister, actually, aren't you up late, Krister, by the way? My older cousin actually has shown interest kind of in D&D. That may happen at some point. His brother, I don't know, but they've gotten big into board game. We're going to do a bunch of board gaming and do that kind of thing. But I'm here, and they're not showing up until way later. So I thought, well, I could just fiddle-faddle around and watch TV and do nothing, or I could get set up and try to get something done. And I felt bad for missing out on Friday because it was kind of, I feel like it was my own fault for not just not allocating my time in a very efficient way. 1:24 a.m. in Sweden. Darn, Krister, what are you doing up so late? My goodness, if I'm up that late, my time, somebody shoot me. But I thought there's been something on my mind lately, so I thought we could see if there's any. Well, I mean, I say see if I was going to say see if there's any juice there. Hey, Ian, that's right. Get her done. And I'm just streaming this to YouTube. I'm not multi-streaming it. So you can see I don't have access to some of my stuff. So there was no intro video and that stuff. I'm just doing this kind of on the fly, on the down low, if you will. So we're YouTube only tonight. Just kind of running it. I've had on my mind, so a couple things. Let me see, because one of the interesting things I will say, how should I put this? One of the advantages of doing these kind of streams is having to put together your ideas in something that approaches sense. It doesn't always succeed. I will admit I probably can go back and listen to some streams and I'm blathering nonsense that maybe folks who are here often enough have figured out how to parse into something useful, but what having to talk to people, having to try to explain to people, not even explain, just discuss, is you have to be able to put your thoughts into some sort of order. Kind of figure things out. So, and I'm really appreciative for that, because otherwise I think you're just in your brain, you're just kind of looping around. And it's not that you have to stream to do this. I think Discord and social media, when it's doing well, I think is giving you these similar outlets where you can kind of spitball stuff, work through it, and kind of get things going. Frederick says there should be a feat or special ability gained every 3 levels. I mean, I guess that's fine. I don't know if we need hard and fast rules. Maybe a better way, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but I might say, well, because it makes more sense, and it's fine to me, say if some things are front loaded, some things are back loaded, because I think by making it, if we get very too overly regimented, I think you can run into kind of issues. I think it's what's something I like about the OSR, or just old school kind of plays, that things can kind of be a little bit loosey goosey. Everyone doesn't have to go to the beat of the same drum, so to speak. Hey Terrence, yep, Saturday night here up country, Studio B by myself. So let me get back, and this doesn't have to be particularly laser focused. I mean, they never are. I've been playing a fighter in Daniel Bandit Keeps, OD&D chainmail mix game. Most of the systems are chainmail in terms of, I think, pretty much combat and I think spells. I don't know. It's a mixture of chainmail and the three brown books, but I think a lot of it comes from chainmail. Of course, he could give you a better breakdown. I'm playing a fighter in that game, and right now I'm 6th, getting close to 7th level fighter, and we're all kind of higher, all sort of higher levels now. And this has informed kind of this thinking I'm going into. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Now, BX, OSE, the kind of OSR style fighter is not quite the same as kind of the chainmail OD&D fighter. It doesn't get some of the perks that those things that in OD&D, right? You had the kind of concept of, well, at least through chainmail, of sort of manpower, right? You have how a 6th level fighter is worth 6 men, right? So if a 1st level fighter is 1 man, a 6th level fighter is 6 men, and that can be a big deal. That can be a very big deal indeed. And then you have on the fantasy table. So if you're playing, troop combat, the man-to-man one, that doesn't enter into it. And in Daniel's game, I don't think we might not have. Since I've joined that game, and during the sessions I've been there, we may not have used man-to-man. He could jump in at any moment and inform me how wrong I am, but I don't even really remember using it at all. We generally go from kind of the troop combat, in which case that manpower, how many figures you're worth. So a 6th level fighter, 6 figures, is basically 6 times a 1st level fighter, to the point where a single 1st level fighter in that scenario really has no chance to beat a 6th level fighter, which I think is kind of cool. And we've run into more and more situations where Daniel kind of run the math really quick and be like, yeah, they can't defeat you. Like you just they don't have enough dice, they don't have enough, and even getting supremely lucky, it kind of wouldn't be enough, sort of thing. By the time you get to BX, all that stuff is kind of washed away, and they flattened a lot of things. Your to hit progression in, I think, the basic book, and I don't have the books in front of me. I don't know if I even have them around. I could probably try to pull them up, but in any case, it's basically, levels 1 to 3, everybody's kind of +1. And the fighter is sort of reduced down to basically being, hey, I get to wear all the best stuff, right? I have the best armor class, kind of thing, right? That kind of becomes the fighter's sort of shtick. Hey, I've got the best armor class, or yeah, I don't know. Well, I guess maybe clerics could. Can they even say that? I don't remember if there's something that prevents clerics from getting down to plate mail if they can also. But then, of course, fighters do have the advantage of being able to wield anything magical, arms and armor they can use, whereas clerics are more limited in that regard. And because, the non-edged weapon thing and most magic items by the book, arms and armor, are kind of edged weapons, so the fighters kind of get that. But they're kind of like, hey, we are sort of the fashion. We got the best fashion. Let's see. Krister says, first thing to fix for the fighter, I think, is to fix them so their attack bonus doesn't go up by 2 every 4 levels, but it says go up by 1 every other level. Actually, Krister, I like, so one of the things I really liked out of Lamentations of the Flame Princess is I like the fact that they fix that, right? Fighters just get a +1, I think, every level. And then everything else is less than that. And I think that's fine. But, the thing is like, that's not even the stuff I really want to do. Like, I think all that stuff is increasing if you want to give them back a boost in combat, if you want to give them more killing power in combat. I actually think that stuff's all great. But actually, that's not even what I was thinking about. Because I think that all that stuff kind of exists. I think you can find that stuff out there. You could find that sweet spot, if you will, for what do I want them to progress. I definitely think, yeah, just in terms of general stuff, yeah, fix that to hit progression. They should have a better to hit progression than anything else. They shouldn't be tied with, everybody. Or like Krister says, going up every 2 every 4 levels is just kind of bleh, right? Let them go up every level. I like the idea that, when they reach level 4, that they could kind of start wiping out sub level 1, or even you can even change that kind of rule of just being able to sort of just scythe through low level kind of grunty enemies, sorts of thing. Like, that's also great. But, and this is kind of related to this whole kind of quadratic wizard thing. What I've seen, this is what I'm saying about playing in Daniel's game having informed me, is what I see is maybe the place where the fighter is lacking. And I guess as we even say kind of in OD&D, it's not limited simply to like BX, and that is not the combat part. It's the outside of combat. Here's what I mean. In Daniel's game, and this is, just like say this OD&D game, when problems are arising now, we're six. I'm 6th level. There's some 7th levels. We might even have an 8th. Someone is 8th level. I think our magic user type might be 8th level. I don't remember the mix, but we're all getting up there in levels. Outside of combat, I'm pretty much an advisor, and there's nothing wrong, I think, at sometimes with being an advisor. Which what I mean is I can suggest ideas. I can obviously participate in discussions, but there's a fair amount of the time now, probably most of the time, where I can make suggestions, I can have ideas, but I'm not the one that can actually implement the ideas. Because we're kind of past the stage where a lot of the stuff that I could do is mostly useful. Like, sure, I can guard the rear, or I can guard the front. I can be in a spot and put my bulk there. Yes, I can do that. But if it comes to say, let's say, here's an example that came up. We were in this underground area, and we've been mucking around in there. It's got some really neat stuff in there. And one of the other things it has going on for it is that there's this fortress that we've been wanting to. We want to essentially get rid of the people who are in that fortress, and we found a secret door that leads, we think anyway, from this underground area that we've been kind of into this fortress we're trying to get into. And we kind of went in there, mucked around a little bit, kind of came out. We don't have absolute confirmation that we're beneath this fortress that we're eyeballing, but we, all the positioning and everything else, it kind of makes sense. So we got the secret door. And of course, there's a danger that we've been going in it and out of it, and I think we're pretty much 100% certain that nobody in the enemy side has spotted the secret door yet. It's just been kind of just hidden for whatever reason for however long a time. So what can we do with that secret door? How can we do it? Well, it comes down to, we know there are powerful people there, and powerful means. So me as the fighter, what can I do? At this point, that secret door is well beyond anything that I can do. Right? I can't lock it. If we just put junk in front of the door, that's not going to do anything. It requires magic, essentially. This is the point where the wizard steps in and goes, haha, I can cast a wizard lock and lock it. And I'm like, great, that's awesome. But a lot of our solutions are like that. It puts a lot of pressure, but also attention on the wizards, because they have all this stuff to do. I think one of our players is a high-level elf, so he's got I think he's actually maxed out. He's capped out his elf, so he's a high-level magic user, and obviously he's got the fighter element also. And then we had the magic user. It's kind of on them. I don't have anything I can do. I can make suggestions, but I can't force them to. I can't say go memorize the spell. I can merely ask them to memorize it. I can't do the thing for them. I can only say, hey, please cast the spell. I can come up with the idea, but essentially I'm in an advisory role until we get into combat, and then I can shine, or attempt to, at least. I'm kind of just, I'm an advisor, and that's fine. I'm not saying I hate that, but at the same time, it makes me wonder if that is something to fix. And I think that's where some of that kind of quadratic wizard sort of thing comes from, right? Because the wizard's taking care of all these problems, because they have, at a certain point, you just get to problems that require fantastic solutions. And the fighter's not a fantastic class. Sure, if I happen to have a magic item that can do something, I could do it, but I can't pick those out. I mean, unless it's a Monty Hall campaign and I'm rolling in loot, I can't pick out the kind of things. I only have a handful. They're only useful once per day, and they're extremely situational. So I think, I think I do have a magic sword, and it can, I think, detect secret doors. No, it can detect sliding passages, and it's got a couple things. And it's not that they're not useful, but they're certainly not something I can just use. Hey, it's certainly nothing like having all the spells available that a wizard has. And I was wondering, well, how can we fix that? Now, one of the things I don't want to do is turn the fighter themselves into a magic user. Like, I'm not trying to turn the fighter into, because I think one of the solutions we see is, let's just make everybody a magic user, like in those subclasses in 5th edition. Okay, well, you're now going to be basically a magical knight, and you're going to be a whatever. And I don't want to do that. I just feel like, no, I don't. Maybe I obviously, if you do, you could balance it to make it work okay. It's just not something I want to do. But I was thinking that something that you could do is give them access to magic, but they're not the magic user, but maybe they have access to magic in a certain way. So what would that look like? And if you see what's been sitting here on the screen, if you haven't kind of looked at it, is just I was looking up stuff. I was kind of looking up retinues for various reasons. Actually, the fighter actually wasn't even my first choice for a while. I was looking at this, but I ran across this. This is just from Wikipedia. So there's the phrase retinue talks about this thing called the lance fournie, aka French for the equipped lance. It was a medieval equivalent to the modern day army squad that would have accompanied and supported a man at arms. Insert fighter, right? A heavily armored horseman, probably knows a knight. So in our case, we'd be talking about a fighter. These units formed companies. Okay, that part's fine. I pasted in there, but it's not really relevant. So the other part I like is here. The lance fournie were formed around a man at arms, aka our fighter, with a retinue of a page or a squire, 2 or 3 archers, a slightly lesser horseman known as a sergeant at arms, or a coutelier, literally a dagger man, aka a bandit or brigand, which I just love that. I just love this whole concept. Oh, Christopher's got a couple things. So Christopher says they think it's better to have them improve more often, even if it's less of an improvement each time. Yeah, I think that's probably true. I mean, just it's nice to have carrots for all the levels if you can swing it. I just wouldn't want to make it kind of a regimented thing, because then I think this is going down that path, that kind of 5e and those games go by, and it can be kind of madness. But I certainly think it's nice to be able to, every time you level up, to get something, as opposed to like, okay, well, I mean, you always get hit points, but it's nice to get something. Ian says this is one of the bits they actually really like about 5th edition, where your fighter could be really good at lock picking or persuasion or etc. I mean, sure, you can. I mean, there's like skill stuff and your proficiencies, and you could multi-class. I guess. I mean, I'm okay to a certain point if you just wanted to get rid of the thief and let everybody kind of do that stuff, but if you have a thief, I'd want to figure that, you want to figure it out. But I think there are different ways to do that. But yeah, I mean, having a fighter not all fighters have to be the same, I think is certainly nice. Magnus says, listening on mobile. Looking forward to hearing how to give our humble boys in steel a boost. Well, we'll see about that. Ian says they're a big fan of ritual magic, which you might be getting to. I'm actually not getting to ritual magic, though I'm not opposed to ritual magic. And that's one of the other kind of things. What I was going to say is something like what Wolves on the Coast does is make magic kind of, basically everybody's a fighter, pretty much. I think, yeah, everyone's a fighter, and you can kind of pick up these spells. No, what I actually been thinking of is this concept of giving fighters this lance fournie. In other words, that over time, they attract or form this little company around them. And of course, this one from Wikipedia is not going to have any magical stuff in it because it's talking real life. But the idea that you might have some archers, that you literally would have a dagger man, I was thinking like, well, what if this is like, there's like a makeup here of, okay, you get a squire who would essentially be a level 0, at least to start, maybe a low level fighter as you go up. And then, as kind of Krista was saying about level to level, you start picking up these people, but it's not, these are separate. So I guess the thing is I think someone's going to say, all right, if they're not saying, all right, well, that's retainers and hirelings. No, these guys are a little bit special. Like this to me is something a little bit more special. One, it's kind of part of the thing that, theoretically a fighter needs someone to watch his horse and all that stuff. But it's more than that. Like maybe, and we could figure out, and you could obviously come up with your own reasons or differences, how they're different. But I don't want it to be like, oh, this is just your retainers. Like I would say that one of the things, being that this is kind of a fighter perk, is this would be in addition to any other retainers you get, but that they do come over time. So you can maybe get different retainers, or maybe you work in the retainer, you kind of change up the retainer system to allow for this, which might be another way to look at it, especially if you wanted to take this concept and work it in other classes. But essentially, if we just get down to brass tacks, what if over time your fighter would aggregate this lance company around them? And maybe at second level, you pick up a squire, and the squire's there. Ian says, is this quote unquote special retainer a fighter only thing, you think, or more like a knight than a fighter? Ian, to be honest, I don't think there's much difference from a knight. I'm not differentiating between a knight and a fighter. I think we do that in kind of romanticism, but knights were just heavily armored horsemen. So, and at its root, right? And so I'm just taking out the horseman part, though often you might end up with a horse anyway. So, in our case, just swap out knight for fighter. And I think in terms of how you want to make it work, fighters, which is another thing we can kind of talk about, fighters being, I always like to think of fighters as having a sort of appeal, a sort of power to them. It draws people. They're these big, larger than life, or, as they level up, kind of larger than life warriors and things. So people get attracted to them. People want to follow them. I mean, think about if you remember. I mean, granted, he was a knight, right? And I'm just talking about fighters, but just in terms of like in Seven Samurai or in Excalibur, when Lancelot is just got on his horse, is walking around, going to Camelot, and runs into Percival, and Percival just needs Percival just needs a little. He just wants something. That's kind of thing, right? You're drawing these people to you, and it's because you're a fighter. It's like these people are kind of, for whatever reason, and of course you can come up with fictionally why these people may be coming to you, but you can come up with it. Mikey asked, "Do we need a better fighter?" It probably depends on what kind of fighter you're talking about or which version of the fighter, but what I'm trying to get at is a problem that I think comes up and in case you missed it, Mikey, or you can go back and watch, is this concept that when you get upwards in levels, I think, and like I said, I found this with myself, I find myself in mostly an advisory position without being able to do much. I can tell other people what I think they should do. I don't have much to do myself. I don't have that much to do ourselves. So what I'm suggesting is I don't want to give myself magic powers. I'm not saying, okay, now the fighter can cast all kinds of spells. No. What I am saying is we can use this kind of Lance Fournier concept. We don't need to stick with it by the letter, that this fighter kind of aggregates this kind of crew around them. And I love the fact this Dagger Man, because it's kind of almost like speaking to the fact that you get a rogue type hanging out with you at a point. And then what I was thinking about is, what about it like if you get to 4th level, which I think of that kind of hero level, the hero fighter, and I don't know what the level title is and say BX, but the fighter kind of gets to a hero level, then maybe you're able to pick up like part of this, not a retainer, not a thing, but like a magic user, and maybe you could even say a magic user or cleric to follow you around. And like I said, part of these differences, like so part of the thing here is I don't want it to just be a retainer. I want it to be a little bit special. So I would either want to kind of, so there are 2 ways to handle that part of it. Either we reform the kind of retainer system so that these kinds of concepts, which we could advance to other classes, okay? Like magic users, you could say, should have some kind of thing following them, but I wouldn't want it to be more magic. Say with a magic user, I'd want it to be fighters, probably. Maybe with clerics, you could think of something else that might be. I wouldn't. The point with this is to say that either through, and maybe the better way to look at this is really just maybe what we really are doing is reforming kind of the retainer system. Is that you kind of attracting almost the opposites, so that you have some access to the opposites. So the fighter, what I'm saying is, hey, not through me, but what if I'm at 4th level and I get access to a 1st level wizard who's kind of like my man in a secure way? Because part of it is I don't want it to be something where like they're going to flippantly turn on you and flee, like other things can. Like I want you to have a more locked in allegiance. Not to say that there would never be circumstances, blah blah blah. But I want to be kind of these are people with whom you have a particularly special relationship, which I think retainers, depending on how you run them, can have that. But I want to make sure I want them to come in. I don't want it to be charisma locked. This is the other thing. I don't want this to be a charisma locked thing. So that if you're a low charisma fighter, suddenly you can't get anything. That's kind of one of the reasons maybe why I'm looking at this sort of at least originally saying to be a little different retainers. I don't want it to be charisma locked. I really just want it to be level. Like the lock is your level. Like the higher level you go, the more the guys they get, and you end up with this kind of interesting sort of composition. Whereas you get a thief. Maybe you get you could even work it up, right? Let's, oops, right? First level or second level? Second level is a squire, okay. Third level, rogue, And if you don't have those in your game, then, insert whatever. Something like that. And then, oops. 4th level magic user or cleric. Kind of like you're forming your own band. So now what is the gameplay? So I just want to kind of pause. Yeah, and there were ways, and yes, Raid is pointing out, like, there were ways to do that, but they weren't very well structured. And like I said, they were kind of gated on your charisma. If you didn't have great charisma, then that kind of limited the kind of retainers you can get. It was kind of random. I'm putting a little bit more order into it. I'd be happy if someone said this was too prescriptive and they want to random it up a bit. But I think the idea is that by the time you get to 4th level, you've kind of got this kind of layout going on. And maybe that instead of having to split up your experience and stuff like that, that they just kind of level up with your level up. So like they start off at 1st level, and then when you go up, they go up, kind of thing. And again, if this doesn't float your boat, you could change it however you like. Anything like that, right? So the gameplay part of it is not that now the fighter doesn't need a party. Well, geez, he's got 4 or 5 people all by himself. It runs off into the woods. I suppose they could do that. There's no telling. And this is just some Diet Coke for the working man. But the idea here is that now I'm 6th level. I've got a 3rd level cleric or magic user in my crew. I have something to do. I don't have access. They're not going to have access to the high level spells that my teammates that are at my level do. And you can change Scout. Well, and if we wanted to tweak the progression or blah 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 blue blue blue, all that stuff. I'm an ideas man. I'm not getting into super deep into the details at the moment. I'm more trying to hash out kind of the overall thing. Is that now I've got stuff to do. Not only is it a boon in a sense to the magic user who now maybe has been holding on to some smaller level spells, and I don't even necessarily, and these are not really for combat. Here's the other thing, like I'm not expecting, and I think it says in here that basically other than maybe this rogue scout type, the other people, your squire and other things are not really supposed to be going into combat with you. They're there as your kind of support staff, so I don't expect them to be getting into combat. This is not really to beef up to give me combat magic or access to whatever combat spells or combat divine prayers. This is for giving me some extra utility outside of that. So now I can, if we've split the party maybe, or the magic users don't have prepped the spells, now I can think about, well, what is my magic user prepping? It's kind of a little bit like I can kind of play a little bit of a magic user, but it's kind of part of my squad. Like it turns my fighter into that sort of captain hero type. Maybe if I was going to do some kind of subclass things, maybe I'd say here, it's say at 4th level, whatever, some points, like, hey, you choose, do you want to be kind of a captain of men, or you want to be some kind of reaver that doesn't care about such things and runs off solo? You could potentially have some different branches if you want to make this a branch path. But I thought this was an interesting way of bringing in something that kind of did exist. So, we have some little foundation of what kind of really was happening. But, of course, we're playing a fantasy game, so that's not the be-all, end-all. But it is something that kind of was there. And kind of turning it as a way of sort of giving the fighter their own posse, for lack of a better word, that they can deploy just to give them some stuff. But we're not altering the fighter at a core level. We're not turning the fighter into a magic user or a half magic user or anything like that. But we're kind of giving them access to some stuff, and we're kind of playing off the fact that they're heroes. They're 3rd, 4th level fighters. They're heroic. People are attracted to heroes, right? There's a reason why the Knights of the Round Table were renowned, and this is to me a way to kind of deliver that. And so for someone like me, I go, well, if I had that, and I could kind of like, okay, when I'm out of combat and I'm out of my main fighterly thing, and frankly, much more of the game, at least in our game, is spent outside of combat than in it. I can go from being just an advisor to, I'm at a lower level, so to speak, but I can kind of switch off and I can say as the fighter, you, Merloid, my not so great magician, what can you help us with in this situation? And I can kind of go to Merloid's card and I can say, oh, I've got I don't know, hypnotics. No, I wouldn't really want to give them. They can't really have attack spells, but I don't know. We've got, floating disc I could use to help carry this huge crate out. Great, my man. I have Murloid cast floating disc when we go out there, and that way the magic user doesn't have to memorize floating disc. They can get rid of it because I'll say no, Murloid will have floating disc attached to it, or I could have Father so and so, give us a prayer of protection from evil or something, whatever, and then they can do that. So it's like I get to do something. I have access to the magic kind of thing, but it's not. I'm not changing the nature of the fighter. I'm just kind of playing up this idea of this kind of fighter as sort of a leader, a martial leader type, or at least potentially a martial leader. Like I said, I wouldn't, if somebody just didn't want to play this, I wouldn't force it upon them. I would have it something like, hey, a guy comes up to you, wants to take you on, is begging you to, you're going to the nearest town. Oh, you trained for second level, and someone else there has been begging you to take them on as a squire or apprentice. Do you want to take them? Yes or no? No. And if you don't, then like, all right, fine. And then, the next level, whatever. Right. So I wouldn't force anyone into it, but I think it'd be a neat way to kind of diversify without really changing the rules. Really, I'm just kind of, sort of tweaking the retainers, right? I guess would be the way I put it. Like, this is really a way of tweaking retainers for fighters, or unless we turned it into a full-fledged, just kind of rewrite a little bit of how retainers work, which again, I would not be opposed to. It's like the idea that maybe these retainers come and that they're kind of, like I said, filling in those gaps, or almost being the opposite of what you are. I don't know what a cleric's opposite would be. Clerics and thieves might be a little bit tough to figure out what kind of opposite they would have, but wizards get fighters that maybe they can kind of put up front, kind of thing. But I don't know if that would work either. Because like I said, with the fighter, it's not about getting more combat. It's not about getting more fireballs thrown out there. It's about that outside of combat, like, what can we do kind of thing. And it's not the only thing that would fill that. Like, I think Ian had mentioned, hey, Ian, I'm mentioning you and you got to leave. Have a good one. Mentioned the kind of ritual magic. That'll be another way to do it. But I thought, in a way, this kind of thing changes the least about the fighter, whatever version of the fighter you're using, but maybe gives them a little stuff. I see there's a lot of comments. Let me go back and look through comments here. I didn't mean to go. Let's see. Raid's got a bunch of stuff. What it said, Ray says, as years go on, I start to drift towards liking skill-based games because of this kind of thing. I like versatility to sculpt someone over time. Yeah, that is something that, not that you can't have in class-based games, but yeah, it tends to be, you kind of either have to have that kind of prestige class or feats or something into the mix. Because, yeah, otherwise, like in BX or something, like, you're a fighter, you're just kind of fighter for life, right? Realty also says that we have a low magic game going, and their hunter type has become a sort of hound master. Ooh, I like that. Magnus says that, like the sound of it, what if a natural part of a fighter's aggression was the accumulation of leadership type skills that could let them buff the party? Yeah, I mean, you could look, that's the thing, is you can look at it in a bunch of different ways. Like, people are attracted to power that they understand, right? Wizards and clerics are powers that people are most likely going to fear. You're definitely afraid of God's wrath. Maybe you bathe in the light of it also, so maybe a cleric goes both ways on that. Like, they could be like, appear to be holy and just, you want to be in that light, or, wrath of God type thing, or both. I would assume that wizards would just be scary. I mean, people are just scared of them, right? Gandalf never, Gandalf didn't go around doing mean things to people, but still, he scared people. People are scared about that kind of stuff. And not that people aren't scared of fighters, but I think it's different because I think it's just a power that we all understand. We all appreciate, kind of, in a way. But yeah, it's totally about kind of looking at, like, how does that power translate into sort of social dynamics? And then taking it just beyond that, like, how can that be leveraged to sort of give them just a little bit of out of combat oomph? Because I think too often people focus on the combat part, and there's some kind of little, I don't know if it's a mosquito or just a little thing flying around over there. I think people always want to go to combat and just say, give more combat stuff, give more combat stuff. And I'm not averse to it, especially from, to a certain degree, more bonuses, there are better bonuses to hit and things like that. I'm all for pretty much all of that. But I think if we just stop there, it doesn't ultimately solve the problem. Because, like I said, if I've noticed a weak spot of the fighter in the OD&D game, it's not his combat stuff. Once we get into melee, Like, it's on, and that's fine. But for good reason, we're often trying to avoid combat because even in our levels, it's deadly. Things can go south, and we're just, we're trying to maximize these other opportunities. And now that I find that, well, the kind of mundane solutions oftentimes aren't enough anymore. Just kind of, well, what if we covered our tracks? It's like, okay, that's fine, but we're not being followed by level 0 nothings anymore. We have people who can cast divination magic or have infravision or have some other things. So like that's not going to cut it, right? We're at that point where it's like, okay, greater powers are sort of at work here. What do you do? And that's where it's kind of like, well, now we kind of need, magic. Magic kind of becomes a thing. And there are probably multiple ways to skin that cat. Certainly, if you want to change the way magic works or things, you could do that. You could probably change the way fighters interact with that stuff. I'd be totally fine with saying at certain levels you kind of level up. Like, just like at certain levels, certain spells, just hey, if you got over X amount of hit dice, then sleep is no longer effective, right? Except it works on a spell by spell thing. I'd be fine for saying maybe fighters in particular get some kind of they're just not good at, they just don't interface with magic, or magic has a hard time interfacing with them, or something like that. Like again, it could be multiplicity of things. But I just thought, well, by default, it's kind of, we're in the sort of realm of you kind of need magic, and fighters are always going to have sort of limited magic. I mean, it's just going to be very situational and oftentimes combat focused. So if we're not in combat, then my flaming sword of the blah 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 doesn't do me a whole lot of good. We're waiting on the wizards to figure out what spells work, or some other kind of plan that's mostly, it's going to probably involve magic 99% of the time. So why not give the fighters some of that without giving it to them, if that makes sense. Let's see. Frederick says, Arcanum, you buy skills from other classes. You can find a trainer, cost gold and XP. I mean, that's fine. I mean, I don't always love those systems. I do like kind of a little bit of the niche protection. I feel like it's a good thing. I mean, I guess if everybody has it, then everybody can do it. But don't you? I mean, I guess I would say with a system like that, do you end up with everyone just kind of playing Witchers, where there's sort of like the the classic like fighter, magic user, thief, and just everybody's running everything? Or are there still advantages to having some focus? Not that I guess there needs to be, but it just, I don't know that I want, or, maybe it's just like 5th edition where everybody just kind of has an archetype in their brain and they just kind of build it. I don't know. I kind of like some of I feel like sometimes the limitations of the classes are good. And I'm not trying to tear down those walls necessarily. I'm just looking at some ways we can kind of, I'm not even saying adding flex to the walls. I mean, a little bit, right? Because if I have this magic user sidekick, then sure, I can kind of use them to be the little spellcaster, but it's not changing my character, right, in a fundamental way. It's like I'm running, I get to run a lesser other character once in a while. Let's see. Frederick also says, in Fantasy Trip, you can buy skills and even spells, custom tailor the character to your desire. I mean, yeah, again, it's kind of the same thing. I'm not opposed to it. I've played GURPS. I've enjoyed GURPS and other games like that, Marvel superheroes and all these other games where you can pick and choose things. But I don't know that we need that everywhere. I don't know that we require that. It's fine. If you want to do that, it's fine. Go levelless and have a whole bunch of stuff and you can make it. But that to me is not really what I'm trying to do. This is not about like, hey, I want to play that's a different question would be, I want to play a magic fighter. I forget what they call the 5e1, the kind of fighter type. How do we do that? Like, that's not the question I'm trying to answer. I'm not trying to answer that question of, hey, you want to be a combo fighter magic user? I mean, and the answer is easy, play an elf. And if you want to take the species part out of it, just make an elf be a fighter magic user combo, it's right there. Right? It's already there. Don't even need me to do it. Like, if that's what you want to do, it already is there. It's called reskin the elf class and as your fighter magic user. But that's not the question I'm trying to answer. The kind of the question I'm looking at is what? Yes, Eldritch Knight. Thank you, Sapphire Ridge. Yep, Eldritch Knight is exactly what I was thinking. I'm not trying to create the Eldritch Knight class or enable that. And like I said, it's already the elf is already your template for that if you want it. what I am pondering is we don't want to change the fighter. If you were to look at kind of what are our core at this moment, what are our kind of core assumptions? What are sort of our ruling things? I don't want to change the fighter at a core level. I'm not trying to give them a bunch of stuff that don't already have. I'm not trying to make them into an Eldritch Knight half caster. That's not what I'm trying to do. And I'm not trying to weaken magic users or take anything away from them. I'm not trying to rebalance the game at the moment. That's also not my intention. So with a couple of those things in mind, you go, okay, well, so what do you do for fighters if you want to do something? So you may not even see a problem. And it might be very campaign specific. If you don't see a problem, if you don't see where there might be something to do here, then, there's nothing to do. But the way I see it, like I said, is my experience having played a little bit, which this may be some of the most time I've spent playing kind of a high level fighter, is Sapphire Ridge says fighters could benefit from the hirelings better captain or something. Well, that's kind of where this lands for me. I don't know how much you caught Sapphire Ridge, but that's kind of the whole concept is to give them a special set of retainers that progresses, that gives them some kind of more out of combat utility as they can sort of order their lance or their accompanying, I think I would call it a lance, accompanying their lance, which would be a kind of a special set of retainers, unless we wanted to totally revise the retainer system, which I wouldn't, it's not that it's that difficult or it's not that complicated, but kind of work it a little bit differently. Because like I said, I don't want it to be charisma locked. I don't want you to become, you're a mid-level fighter, but you can't have that many retainers because your charisma is low, or anything like that. I just want it to really be based on your level. Raid asks off topic if me or Daniel is going to Origins. I am not going to Origins. I haven't made any arrangements to, so I'm not going. I haven't asked Daniel if he's going, so I don't know, but I'll speak on it with it. I don't think he's been. I don't know if that's on his list. So I'm gonna say I don't think so, but I don't know. So yeah, I mean, in a way, what I'm doing is saying, hey, let's look at fighter retainers a little bit differently. If we kept retainers the way it is, then I want this to be separate. Super retainers, a fighter special. So I don't want it locked by charisma, and I don't want. I either want them to have really good bonuses to morale, so it would be something really horrible. But it's almost like, in those games where the paladin has their steed, and if their steed is killed, another steed shows up, right, kind of thing. I know that sometimes in the games they make you wait like a whole year and a day, and then your new steed will show up. Something like that. Like if your squire runs off, another squire is going to come to you when you go back to town. Maybe you have to level up and then another squire. So if your magic user runs away or gets killed or something like that, like your next level, you get another one. Like they're sort of special in that way. And maybe that's too gamey for some, and I think you probably figure out some ways to make it not feel so gamey. But, the other part of it is like, just if you were just to think about it in a way that might make sense fictionally for, say, the wizard part of it is that every wizard, I'm sure every up-and-coming magic user considers themselves to be a Merlin type, and they're looking for their Arthur. They're looking for their Pendragon who they can maybe boss around behind the scenes or whatnot and kind of work their way. So they're kind of, you're a higher level fighter. You've shown yourself to be a hero. You're probably going to have some wizards sniffing around wanting to be your sort of, again, in the fiction, functionally on a meta level, you're controlling the wizard. But, you can have fun in the fiction of the wizard thinking that they're kind of pulling the strings behind the scenes. Like, I got my metal skull cap and now I'm gonna sleep with my eyes open, and Arthur's this knight is gonna do everything I say, so that I can be the power behind the throne, sort of thing. I mean, Sapphire Ridge asked if they would roll loyalty. This isn't fleshed out at all, so I'd have to work on it, but I'd want it to either be like no, or it would be kind of special, right? They'd either get some big bonus, so you'd have to do something really bad. I'm always open to the fact in a role play scenario that the fighter turns on them and, I don't know, kills the rogue in cold blood and stabs the squire and burns him over an open flame, and then the magic user is watching in horror, and at that point it's not like you're incapable of running away. But I wouldn't want it to be something where you're checking it very often, right? So I'd want to put some safeguards in there. This is not I like the idea behind these retainers would be Not that these are things that now your GM can try to remove from you at their earliest convenience or some kind of plot thingy. Like, these guys are sticking with you. There you go. Sapphire says every Cromwell needs a General Fairfax. Absolutely. Tara says looking for Arthur stuck in a party of Uthers. Yeah, exactly, right. But I could totally see that as if you want to come up with a why this parade of wizards who want to bind themselves, and you could even have fun with it. You could have some kind of oath, right? Yeah, make a note. Like, maybe the fighter has to swear some kind of oath if you want to do like some oath to do something, and that oath. I really like that idea, and it's in Tolkien somewhat, and some other things like the kind of like this like to what does the fighter swear? That kind of the power of this fighter doing something, and if you want to go with kind of a knighthood element, maybe they have to bind themselves to a higher lord or a goodly king or something, right? Arthur and his knights, and then they have squire. What you can kind of, or maybe they just have to swear to do something. I swear by the the blood of my fathers to take down the evil king, and then it just like there's a power. The oath has a power, and that maybe that power draws them in. You can have some fun with what the kind of mechanism is, maybe, or what is it that draws these particular individuals to the fighter. But I definitely don't want it to be just like a regular old plain retainer. I don't want it to be charisma bound, only bound by your class level in terms of what you get. I don't want it to be where they're going to run away the first time something goes a little bit south. They got to be more made of sterner stuff than that, and have more either confidence, or that you guys are kind of swearing oaths and binding. You're bound to each other, so that there's some I don't know, you could call it like a metaphysical sort of dealio. But I definitely would want it to be kind of something like, no, you have this, because you're getting something with it. Like, this is really becomes a class feature, and so I don't want it to just be like, oh, you got this thing, and then it gets undone. Sapphire Ridge says these brothers in arms would count towards party total for encounter numbers and evasion. I mean, I think for evasion and things like that, and I guess so part of the thing is that the historical Lance Fourni, most of them did not go into combat with the knight, and I don't feel like they need for them to get the utility I want out of them, because for me this is not making the knight or the fighter a better fighter. There are other, not to say that they can't use some improvement there, but this particular fix, enhancement, whatever you want to call it, is not addressing that. I think there are things just as simple as saying, hey, we're going to give you, you're going to go up your hit die, your to hit bonus is going to go up by 1. Like, there are things that people have already discussed ad nauseum. You can search up to do that part. It's more like, okay, now that we're not in combat, not necessarily in camp, because they might come in the dungeon with you, but they're going to kind of fade in the background, which I think oftentimes happens with kind of hirelings, right? The guy, your link boy, your torchbearer, right? When the fighting starts, the torchbearer kind of fades into the background. They're just kind of assumed to be there, and you're kind of assumed to be kind of stepping to the fore, right? You don't generally worry about those guys. They're not active combatants. If somebody lives, then probably the torchbearer lived, right? They just were hiding in a corner, and the torchbearer's there. The same kind of thing. These guys are not about like filling out your combat numbers. But what they are about is if you're in a dungeon and or at some other kind of situation, now you have access to some things. It's not you, but you have access to them. So I think, example, I don't know, let's say, and again, I don't know the level, whatever. Like, you're in a situation where you're interrogating somebody, questioning them, right? And so you might go, you're asking questions. You could do that, but at a certain point, it's like, well, does any, I could say, like, right now as a fighter, I could say, hey, one of you guys have Cone of Truth? I don't know if I don't remember if it's a cleric spell or magic spell. Someone got Cone of Truth? They can cast this guy so we can get some straight answers. Because, in Daniel's game, my character's a paladin, so we're not torturing, right? Anyone got Cone of Truth? No? Okay. Well, I don't know. I guess that's about it, right? In this scenario, maybe I could say, okay, hey, Merloid. That's my my magic user. And again, I don't know what level Cone of Truth is, but let's say I'm a 6th level fighter. So let's just say this is a third level magic user at this point. And again, I don't know what level Cone of Truth is, so I'm not about, I don't really care. But basically, hey, Murloid, you have Cone of Truth, cast Cone of Truth on this guy. So it gives me a chance to kind of get some extra things to use in different situations. I'm not drastically altering my class. If I get separated from my lance, I can't use them. It's in a way, it's kind of like having some magic items, something like that, but they've got character. You can have fun if you're into this thing about kind of, who are they called? What are their story? If you want to get into that, how do they relate to you? Like, how did they find you? What kind of thing that you did? There's this lesser Cone of Truth. Yeah, it's more of like the ice cream cone of truth. They have to lick the cone and then they'll have to answer a question directly, something like that, right? Whatever it is. But, you can get this extra utility. And it in a meta way, if you just break it all down, am I kind of saying, hey, give your 4th level fighter access to 1st level spells a little bit that are non-combat spells? If you just want to break it down, you can say, well, yeah, I guess. Maybe that's what I'm saying is what we're doing ultimately. But I think we're formulating it in such a way that the class stays itself. It kind of matches up with the concept of fighters. And, I'm using knights as an inspiration. But like I said, the only difference in a knight and a fighter was that a knight was mostly fighting on horseback. And in D&D, we don't tend to do a lot of horseback things. But other than that, like, yeah, a knight is a fighter. A fighter is a knight. Or you could, paladins were kind of also this kind of concept of knights. But the kind of that kind of paladin didn't have anything to do with being a holy warrior, detect evil. They were, Charlemagne's guys. They were basically fighters. They were fighters, right? They were mostly on horseback, sure, and we're ditching the horseback part. Other than that, they're fighters. So you're saying, hey, we're going to give your fighters a little crew. And, and I think this picture I got was from actually something like that. It's kind of the knight and then the crew. And part of that crew will give you in that crew is a magic user type or a cleric. I think I would let them choose. You could even do, I would say you could do like the law chaos thing, but I would say you don't even have to do that. You could let them kind of choose. They want to be, have a magic user, you want to have a cleric, or you could roll whatever you want and give them kind of, in a way that's sort of, like I said, leveraging the retainer system. And maybe we just refashion retainers to fit these kind of classes, like that your retainers are more about which I actually really like now that I'm thinking about it, this really concept that retainers are all about your class and follow that mold as opposed to your charisma roll. Charisma rolls are still charisma is still plenty powerful because of all those, charisma, you could probably have work on morale if you want to, but, on your reaction rolls and things like that, charisma is still extremely powerful, but just saying, hey, we're going to tie your retainers and maybe shape the nature of your retainers based on your class. And maybe this I could say, well, hey, this is the first one that I've thought of, which is fighters. Shaping the fighters' retainers to be of a certain way, a certain style. Seth Ferris says, it's a TV show protagonist class. He collects useful B characters like Sinbad. Kind of. I mean, I don't want it to overwhelm the party, right? I don't want it to be like, well, the fighter doesn't need anybody. That's why I like the fact that these are kind of scaled down. They're much lesser level than the fighter. So the fighter, if your party's all 4th and 5th level, let's say, the fighter that's got the 1st level wizard isn't exactly tramping all over the wizard's toes because the wizard's, just much more skilled. He's got access to just tons more spells and all that stuff, right? At the same time, I think it actually helps the wizard in some ways because they can say, hey, now I'm going to, your 1st level magic user, he's going to have detect magic, right? And so it's one of those things, I think it happens all the time in the game. As soon as you need detect magic is the time you don't memorize detect magic. You're like, it was funny. We had this came up on Thursday's game. We were fighting this line of couple of giant ants. And I looked out there, and right here I am again. I'm in sort of advisory mode. I'm saying, hey, man, boy, wouldn't a lightning bolt spell be a treat? Just because they're just lined up. And the wizard's like, oh, my gosh. This is the first time in a month or whatever. I had so many sessions. I thought Fireball would be more useful to, and I didn't. It's the first time in forever I didn't have lightning bolt. Like, but now you get in a situation where you go, hey, again, it's not really analogous with those particular spells, but you don't have to take Detect Magic. Murloid will have Detect Magic. You take that other spell, and then we'll kind of have that sort of covered a little bit. And then me as the fighter, I can feel like I got a little bit more utility because it's like, even though, yeah, it's not, I mean, it's like part of my class feature. So I can feel like as a player, like I'm doing that. And, I don't, like I said, I don't think it's enough to step on the wizard's toes because by the time you as the fighter are getting access to a first level magic user, again, assuming people are basically staying at around the same level, then that magic user is well beyond that, where they're going to feel like, hey, your magic user's casting Detect Magic and stepping on my toes. Like, no, we're saving your spells for crazier things like that. Terrence says maybe individual classes could have bonuses to recruiting certain retainer types. Sure. You can run this a whole bunch of different ways. I don't know how. I guess what my point is, I think I want to either, because in a way you could look at this, and if you look at this progression here, and you're basically getting a squire, who's basically another fighter, but lower level than you, and maybe they don't even really go up much. I don't know how. I haven't really thought that part through. Maybe they go up at the same rate, whatever. You're getting a rogue, thief, scout type, and you're getting a magic user, cleric. So you're basically filling out the other party members, right? You're not getting more fighters because that's not what you need. So I like the structure of that, just because we're looking at these as kind of out of, at least initially, with this kind of outside of combat. Maybe you could do this a bunch of different ways. You could make some rules. Hey, thieves are only going to do this stuff. They're not going to go in. Magic users and clerics aren't going to go into combat, right? You could make all those kinds of rules around your retainers generally, and then, like I said, if we wanted to totally kind of overhaul a bit how retainers work, then maybe we want to look at that. Having it on a roll the dice, it's fine up to a point, and maybe this is one of those places where we go, hey, let's not do it randomly so you don't end up with 3 rogues, whereas other guys got 3 wizards. Something like that. Like, I don't know. I don't have a exact answer. I think you could probably tweak it to suit the style of game that you want. I think that, that's kind of funny. I think the fiction part's the easiest part to solve. It's just a matter of, like, how does that look, right? This Lance Fournier was a real thing, and it had a set kind of things you would have. You'd have a squire, you'd have a certain amount of kind of support, and then I do love this coutelier, this, like, literally you might have a dagger man, basically like a brigand that's kind of hanging out with you. And then, we're adding that because we're playing D&D, we're playing a fantasy campaign. It's like, well, they'll probably throw in a wizard or cleric, or you could even have both. Like, if you wanted to have second level squire, maybe even push the first level squire, second level, that kind of coutelier, this kind of rogue, thief, scout type, third level cleric, fourth level magic user, or vice versa. Maybe if you want to almost do it like a GLOG thing, and like, hey, at the end of 4 levels, you'll have all of these, but which one you get, you roll. It might be a little bit weird if you're the first level fighter and you get in your second level fighter, you get a first level magic user, because that I feel like is getting a little bit too close to the other magic user, assuming there is one. I mean, there doesn't have to be one in the party, but assuming there is one, maybe I say, like, it might be getting too close for comfort. I don't know. I don't have answers necessarily to all of that. Let me see, my daughter's just wishing me good night. But I think those are kind of that next level of question to ask if we want to look at and say what other classes we could do. But I've been kind of mulling this conceptually around in my brain, and I do like it. And maybe part of it is because I do kind of like the whole Arthurian thing. I like kind of bringing elements of that in here. I like the idea of these fighters being something, having a little bit of oomph to them, and and that just kind of paired up with now playing this kind of high level fighter. This might be at this point maybe the most of a high level fighter I've played, at least in a single kind of campaign. So it's been interesting to see kind of what my role in the team, in the group is. And I just kind of was thinking about it and then crystallizing, like, yeah, like outside of combat, I'm kind of now in an advisory role. I mean, certain things that some things are not skill or not, character skill dependent, like grand strategy, all that stuff. We're all equal. But then with a lot of other things now, it's like, yeah, we're kind of kind of sort of, it's just like, what do the wizards have that we can do? And then we'll kind of work around what the wizards have. I'm like, yeah, I don't really have much to offer except for the couple of, I do have, like I said, I have the magic sword, which has a couple of abilities, but they're very situational. So they'll come in handy once in a while, but you can't really, you can't, aren't too many contingencies that you can work around that stuff. Cause it's like, well, either it's kind of there or it's not. Let's see. Raid says, am I at all worried about management of a small group of characters? I'm not. I mean, I'd want to. I think you could. I'm not. No. I mean, there's. I mean, I can't speak for everybody's games, right? But the idea with these would be very simple. Maybe you would. Maybe it would be something a little bit like, I don't really. So I like the sidekicking in 5th edition. I think it was a pretty good way of getting like a hireling / retainer sort of in the game. Right, but they were kind of pared down characters. I always felt like something I like with the OSR old school is that you don't have to go that route of having like a really complex player character and this other thing that's not. At the same time, I could see that, well, I've got this other character I'm managing now. But maybe it's just simplified it to kind of the spells you have. Like maybe you just do something with the spell book, whatnot, where your spell book basically, it's not like the magic, it's not like the full magic user where you're doing the, I suppose you could run it however you want to, right? I guess what I'm saying is I think you could simplify things like the spell books and things like that. Maybe they just have X amount of spells. Your first level magic user just has one spell, and that's the spell they can cast for that day, right? Then they get 2 spells. Like you could play around with how you're doing their spells and their progression, so you don't have to track very much. They have a set amount of hit points, but like I said, they're not going to combat anyway. But you probably still want to have hit points just because stuff's going to happen. You can't always tell where the combat is, and then basically what spells they have, and maybe they just always have those spells that they have. Or at least that could be the default, or that could be one way of doing it. If you as a player want to have a whole secondary full character sheet with kit and stuff and do all that, I mean, that's fine too. I mean, they're not super complicated, right? They do have a couple more moving parts than other classes, but I would say you could probably simplify it down if you need to, if it is too complicated, or you could delve into it if you need to, and there's a happy medium in there, I would say too. But I wouldn't let it necessarily stop me, because if you wanted to, you could literally have it be like this person has these spells. First level, 1 spell. Second level, 2 spells. And then you roll for the spells. Maybe, you could go to the wizard. And if you have a wizard in your party, you could try to get some spells out of them. Like, you could probably figure it out where it's like a note card kind of thing. Or you could fully flesh them out. So, I guess it's a potential issue, but I think it could be pretty much satisfactorily dealt with in a couple different ways, depending on which you want to go. Become the Swiss Army sword character, the solution for every situation. Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm kind of trying to avoid a little bit, right? Like, I want to give some utility, but I'm not trying to. That's why I think it's important, or at least in this conception, it's important that if you get a magic user follower, that they're kind of lower level, right? Because again, I'm giving you, like, this kind of system is giving you pretty much complete control over them. They're going to kind of be with you. They're not liable to run away or, like exceptional things happening notwithstanding. They're going to kind of be there. So it is, in a way, you are getting access to magic. Like, that's kind of like meta-wise, you're getting access to some magic. So it's important for me that magic is pretty far toned down from what a magic user goes. Just like, ideally, a magic user's combat, martial effectiveness is way toned down from the fight, right? It's kind of the same, even though that's not always the case, but that's kind of the same thing. So I don't really want to make it so that you're like the person who's everything, but I did think, like, well, what if you could get a little taste of some different things so that you could just be more maybe than an advisor? Like, can I be more than an advisor in some of these situations? Can I fill in a couple things? Can I, can it not just be the magic users that are now pondering or do, whatever, that I can have some kind of, something to do other than just my input on what the plan should be. But be like, no, I got this, I can't tell them to, like if, you could be playing on the party with some magic users. You can be like, hey, man, I really think you should take this spell X, Y, and Z, but you can't make them do it. You may think you know better. You may have said that, and then you watch sessions go by as they don't take those spells, and those spells would have really been useful, and you're just going, ah. But there's nothing you can do about it. You just keep saying, hey, I think you ought to take that. But if you had your own kind of little mini magic user, then maybe you could give your mini magic user whatever, if assuming there aren't high level spells, you could give them some of that, and then you can do a little bit. But you're still the fighter, right? That's kind of like, I don't want you to change from being the fighter. Like, I'm not trying to turn the fighter into the mini magic user, but I am trying to say maybe we can sneak a little magic into the fighter, but not really, keeping the kind of paper walls around. Nope, I am still just a fighter, but I've got a sidekick, and the sidekick has some spells. And maybe that's kind of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, just saying, you're the same as me. It's like, okay, but, it's a little bit different to me. It doesn't have the same feel. However you want to look at it. I don't think I have too much more to say about it. I'll probably need to muck around with it. I thought it was interesting. It's been on my mind. I love this idea of the lance fourni. This idea that you might have these guys running around. Terrence says, you have a sword, you can make him do it. I mean, I can't though, Terrence, because like the elf has a sword that has a magic sword that has flight, so he can actually just fly away from me. They got too much. They got a lot of stuff. They got a lot of stuff and those spells. But this is what I will say too, because it's a good thing about it. One of the things that OD&D, definitely chainmail, but I think OD&D works kind of like this, or maybe I don't know if I haven't, we've been playing this OD&D chainmail mix, so it's hard for me to remember what's part of OD&D and what part is chainmail, right? Most of the combat is kind of more chainmail, but I guess the point I'm saying is once you're in melee, you cannot cast spells into melee. So one thing it does is it does make being a wizard more situational generally. Because you have to be a little bit, either you have to have room, so you have to have range, and sometimes situationally you can create gaps and things, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't end up mattering that much, because if one side, if you could be back out of melee, but if the creature you're trying to cast the spell on is in melee with somebody else, they're still in melee and they're still you can't cast spells on them. There are things you can do. For instance, our wizards love to use Phantasmal Force to create illusion type stuff, and they'll kind of, a melee will be coming on and they'll cast it outside the melee to have it get in the melee. Like, there's still some things to do, but a lot of spells, that's assuming they can stay out of the melee too, which is not always possible. It becomes a lot more situational. You have to be a bit more foresighted in either setting up the encounter or getting the encounter set up on favorable terms, so you have some kind of ranged part where it's like, okay, I can cast a spell. Otherwise, melee just is you're in melee, and then you can't cast spells anymore, and you're just you're stuck having to just go toe to toe. So the one thing the fighter has, right, in the say, it's like, if Terrence is saying, hey, use your sword, fighter, is if I get the jump, like if I win initiative in one of these things, and that's kind of the neat thing I think of being kind of the fighter, the combat part, like this chainmail, OD&D/chainmail thing, like you feel pretty good, because if I get into combat with the wizard, even though the wizard's got fireball and lightning bolt and whatever, or the cleric's got finger of death or whatever, if I get into melee with them, they don't get that spell. Like they got to try to figure out how to get out of melee, get away from me, and cast it. Like, then now you're like in my world. Like, the melee is like the fighter's world, right? And you step into melee, you step in the fighter's world, and the fighter feels strong in that world. So given that kind of system, and I might even think about adapting that to kind of the BX OSE style, because I do like it, right? And I like to think of melee now, especially in these theater of the mind type games, is it's kind of a cloud. You don't know quite where everybody is. Everyone's moving around, so you're just kind of in this however many feet zone of just action, and you just can't target in there. Everyone's dancing around, like trying to, I think of it like looking at Robin Hood, the classic Errol Flynn Robin Hood, when they're all fighting in the Great Hall. It's just, people are ping-ponging around and swinging off chandeliers, doing it. Like, you can't track all that. Hey, Epic of Dreams is here, the Epic. Welcome. I'm actually up in Massachusetts, but I'm not going to be heading to Albany. Unfortunately, otherwise I would suggest meeting up again because I got the Familia coming in. But if you missed it, Studio B, I'm up country. Anyway, so this idea of like not being able to cast the melee is kind of a boon to fighters, at least and fighter types, right? The elf is good. Like the elf is still, kind of amazing because they can kind of do everything, but they do get level capped. Like in our one elf player is level capped, but they're still pretty darn pretty darn strong. Anyhow, that like not being able to cast spells in melee is kind of an interesting thing because it does mean that once melee starts, as a magic user, your choices become pretty limited. Either you can try to stay out of the mix, you can try to get in the mix, you can try to figure out a spell that you can cast that doesn't directly go into melee, like something like an illusion or something else where you can kind of cast it outside, but it can affect melee, but you're not casting directly at the melee kind of thing. But it does kind of constrain your choices, which I think is good in a few ways. I think it challenges the wizard to be creative, and I think it definitely makes your fighter types feel a bit like, yeah, this is my moment, which it should be. You're the fighter. It's in your name. Fighting should be your thing. It is in your very name. But I think, my I'm talking, I guess OGBX. I'm talking about kind of trying to tweak fighters a bit, or at least an idea for doing that. And yeah, I always think of OGBX as kind of my default level, but this particular thing about the not firing to melee is in chainmail. I don't know if it's in BX that you can't cast in the melee. I don't recall, but definitely in chainmail, or at least the way we're playing this kind of chainmail OD&D game, you can't. It might be in BX too. I don't remember. But I appreciate that, right? And fighters are strong. That's kind of maybe the biggest weakness in BX. I mean, I know thieves, depending on how you rule thieves, can be pretty weak. But fighters get a little bit of a short shrift in BX compared to kind of where they were, because they were a lot more formidable. Though there were some neat things. There's some neat exceptions. Like if you're fighting a demon, a wizard's better than a hero. You're fighting certain things. They kind of have, like Gandalf and the Balrog. So you get that. Like you get some neat kind of stuff. But what else have we got? I don't really think I have anything. I think I've talked this subject to death for the moment until I do anything else. What everyone else has got? What does everyone else have going on? I'm trying to see. Is there anything I've missed? I think I'm all caught up on the chat. Drew is here. Drew, I still need to do I still need to read yours on stream. I'm just trying to I need like a day to read through your thing because it's just massive. It's massive. I still need to finish DC 20, which I will do Monday, maybe. So what's going to happen, my cousins are coming. We're staying up here, up country, till Wednesday. I'll be leaving back on Wednesday. Don't know if I'll get the stream on Wednesday. But I'll be here up at least until Wednesday. And then I'll be working from here Monday and Tuesday. So which I think that'll give me... it shouldn't be busy, so I imagine I'll be able to kind of stream. I believe. Let's see. Oh, Magnus, did I miss a comment? Oh, Drew says they're releasing their game soon. When is Free RPG Day? I don't even... Did I miss it? Is it this weekend? Is it tomorrow? Was it today? Is it tomorrow? Is it next week? Magnus, let me see. What was your comment? Let's see if I can find Magnus's comment. Bum, bum, bum. Okay, so Magnus... So let me know if this is it, Magnus, or not. So Magnus said, I think of the Man-at-Arms from Darkest Dungeon who's good first or second slot class who gets a lot of buff, debuff abilities while still being a decent tank bruiser. Was that it? I mean, thanks, Terrence. Happy Father's Day. Well, it's tomorrow, but appreciate it. Yeah, that was kind of part of what happened yesterday. Since I was coming over here to meet my cousins, we went out for dinner, kind of Father's Day dinner last night instead of going Sunday night because I won't be there. And we went to Fogo de Chao, which was nice. Oh, okay. June 22nd. Okay, so it's next week. So I don't like thinking in video game terms because I just get bothered by it. But and I know I should go play Darkest Dungeon. I just haven't. uh, you know. But yeah, I mean, I think in terms of just giving them like a little bit of something, I think it's just like I said. I think, and here's the thing: like I think at low levels doesn't matter so much. A low level fighter, there's a certain right. Here's I think and again, I think we're getting to the kind of quadratic wizard type thing. If you were to graph out, hold on a minute, I can do this. We got a drawing thing. Yes. All right. If you could, hold on a sec. Okay. Just make some rough axes here, right? You get something like this. I think in terms of kind of what you're doing, you're kind of everyone's sort of down here. This will be the wizard one, right? This kind of, and I know it's super sloppy, but okay, so that one, oops, let's change. Can I change colors? Where's the color bit? Is that it? Okay. So that's kind of the wizard, and then the fighter is kind of, maybe with some magic items and stuff, you kind of get like that, right? So down here at low levels, it's not that big of a deal. It's here. Where all that kind of utility stuff and just the way problems are going, things just can get kind of out of hand, right? And I think a lot of people trying to been figuring out how to correct. I don't know, U for utility. How to correct for this. What do we do? What do we do with that area? All right. No, I can't. That's not nice. What do we do with this area? Where it gets at hand, where the wizards, dimension door, teleport, wizard lock, blah blah, pass, what all that kind of like everything in the kitchen sink kind of spell, and just nobody can catch up. Like maybe the closest one, you might say, oh well, there's a cleric in here. Maybe the cleric's kind of going like this, and it's it's a little bit better. And then probably, I don't know if we were going to have thief. The thief's kind of stays the same, but they can, at some point they can kind of cast off scrolls. So maybe maybe they make a late kind of, maybe they do something like that, right? So once they get maybe scroll casting ability, where they can read off of scrolls, and depending on what edition, whatever you're playing, that comes in, like something like that, right? But the fighter's down here. And trying to figure out what to do about that disparity is, I think, what a lot of people get into. But I think a lot of people focus on the combat part. And part of that's valid, because in something like BX, the progression is slow, and and everyone is like, everyone at first level is +1. You're a fighter, you're +1. Like it doesn't feel like the thing. The part that feels the best about the fighter is the fact that right off the bat they're gonna be wearing plate mail, and maybe the cleric can too. Maybe it's like, well, I feel a little bit less good about that, but depending on your party composition, if you're the fighter, you're probably gonna have a better armor class, and you have better kind of whatever. So that's like good. But that's all you kind of have. But because so much of this gameplay down here, which I think is another reason why, so just I think just off the, just the other part of it is I think why so many, do I have any colors I'm using? So many people really prefer this, just in general, this part of the game, early game, is because of that. I think that you're not like looking for the spell that's going to solve it for you. It's all like grunt work. It's all like, hey, what counts in the early game for the most part is basically your creativity and your sweat equity. What can you think of to do and then doing it? And any class can do that. There's no class that is locked from having a good idea and then acting on that good idea. And you don't have a lot of spells that are going to take the place of that. And most of the things that you are, most of the things that you're solving for are also not at kind of a requiring of magic level. But you get up into this area here, and suddenly just being able to lock a door behind you is not really sufficient. Just, you need something special. Where does that special usually come from? If you might have the magic item that fits, you might not, but a spell's going to fit. The difference between what I'm suggesting, what I see a lot of other people suggesting, is they start trying to fix the combat part. And it certainly can use fixing. But I think you can do some of that and then still not ultimately fix the problem, because this is not, in my experience now, it's not so much the combat part of the game, it's when we're not in combat that I feel a little bit just a little bit dissatisfied. Raid says, well, what if your followers die? Well, so the original idea with these followers were that they would basically be staying out of combat. So I would treat them in the way like you might treat your torchbearer or your link boy, in that during combat they're kind of fade into the background and not be targeted and not do any targeting. They're just kind of there, which I think has most people play. Like if you have your torchbearer guy, when combat comes, I don't think anyone's worrying about targeting the torchbearer. Maybe people do, because it wouldn't be necessarily a bad strategy if you can see in the dark and you see the one guy carrying the torch and he looks like a little wimpy guy and he's just wearing rags and he's just got this little torch held above his head. Maybe you would target that guy, but I think generally people will, it seems to me most part, will just let those guys, let those non-combat hirelings, if they're around in this situation, kind of just fade out into the background. In Daniel's game, we just have a thing where we just kind of defend them. And it's just kind of really at this point, unspoken rule that we are defending, we're not allowing harm or contact to come to those non-combatants. So they just kind of sit in the background. If they did die, I would say that much like if you had that kind of find steed ability of a paladin or something like that, like you maybe some period of time, maybe on your next level, next time you're in town or somewhere, right? You'd get a new recruit to join. So that but it would be I would say that my default position would be, it would be an exceptional circumstance for that to happen. Particularly in this case, because they're not meant to be your combat. They're not meant to bolster your combat effectiveness. They're there to boast your capabilities outside of combat. Oh, Terrence, to get a replacement wizard, you got to go to the staffing agency. Ha ha! Nice. Ray says that their henchmen and hirelings drop like flies. I mean, if they do, I would say maybe, that would be something where you have to either, work the system a little bit, or that they kind of you get them back somehow. Of course, this should be tweaked to suit your particular game style game. If you guys have something where there's high danger and enemies are apt to target your hirelings, then you just need to, if you're going to use this, you just need to figure out what it means. Either next time you go back to town, there's a new squire guy. Maybe you have to use a little downtime. You have to post a notice. You have to do some kind of recruitment, spend some money, whatever. But if they are going to drop like flies and you want to make it easier to recruit them because this is supposed to be kind of a class thing, right? It's kind of, it's like a thief and their thief tools. Thieves can do all cool stuff with their thieving tools, but can they lose their thieving tools? Yeah. Right? Should you take them away all the time? I mean, unless they give, if they're not giving you reason to, probably not. And then should you make them have some ability to get them back if they do get lost, drop down a well, thrown in lava? Yeah. And this would be kind of the same kind of dealio. But, at the same time, if they do something horrible happens, like if a wizard loses their spell book, they lost their spell book, right? That's why they got to hold on to their spell book. So I wouldn't want to make it like super disposable, but you'd want to, that's the kind of lens you'd want to look at it for. Like it would be kind of to the wizard spell, like, some kind of relationship similar to that, right? Ray says, we always put the, of the town name after our hirelings. So if they die, we have to get reputation lost in the town. It's that bad. Nice. Yeah, repercussions are good. Yeah, because people aren't going to want to follow you if nobody ever comes home. That's definitely a true kind of thing. Absolutely. Yeah, so I don't know if this solves everything. I feel like this is one way of closing that gap a little bit. Like, I'm not trying to erase wizards. I'm not trying to take anything away from wizards, but and I'm really not even trying to I'm not trying to make fighters the equal of wizards in that way, but I'm wondering, can we give them a little taste? Can we give them a little something? Let's see. It is risky to do ceremonial magic. Yeah, I mean, if you do something like all your magic takes time and rituals and things like that, that's also a limiting feature. Like I said, one of the things I liked about, and it might be in BX, I don't remember, the idea of the concept of melee, like, hey, you can't cast a spell into melee, does help also somewhat in the combat side of it. But like I said, I think the problem that I'm seeing is not the combat part. It's outside of combat. And while being an advisor is fine, and everybody in different phases of the game takes on kind of an advisory role, I think I'm finding that now, kind of mid to late game, and maybe this is, and you think about it, this might be kind of part of that when you're supposed to be maybe kicking in domain type stuff, is that you get access to all these different kind of character types that you can tag along with you. Maybe what I'm suggesting is, which I think a lot of people suggest, is kind of using this as kind of like a kickstarting your domain. You sort of get this kind of early team, and then that kind of is sort of giving you that domain taste. You start off with these guys, you're kind of your personal group following you around, and that maybe that will naturally even lead you towards domain. Because a lot of this is kind of similar to domain in that part of this deal of being like, I'm an 8th level fighter, is because now I have all these dudes, domain, kind of dudes follow me around that I get to do stuff with. And this is kind of that. I'm just seeding it earlier, and I'm being a little bit more prescriptive about the nature of those domain dudes. Does that make sense? Terrence says, quote, aren't you the grave robbers that got my grandson killed? That'll be 100 GP for a beer. Yeah. I mean, one of the things you can do, Ray, is make sure that, that they can lessen the blow if they pay off those families. And, hey, your son died, but he left you like what would be a fortune to them of gold or whatever would make them feel better. But, if the players are greedy and don't want to lose that coin, that can be tough. I know that my game, which has been on hiatus for quite a while now, my players felt pretty bad about their hirelings and tried to, when the ones that passed, they did try to do right by their bereaved, which was nice. The Band of the Hawk. Yeah, I was just there's a guy on YouTube, I don't know his name, but he did like a I think if you listen to all of it, he went through all of Berserk. Or at least all the Berserk that's out. And I think there's one that's like the complete video. And if you watch the complete one, it's like some ungodly, it's like 23 hours long or something. But I was just watching, kind of listening more to his going over, because it's my favorite. I haven't read all the Berserk. I watched some of the things. I've read up I know sort of the plot of it. But I really like that, the early Berserk, I guess they call it, was it the Black Swordsman? The early part where with Midland and the Band of the Hawk and that kind of part before kind of that middle thing where the manga starts off with him sort of already demon fighting, and then it kind of flashes back to that sort of arc with the kind of the rise and fall of the Band of the Hawk. And I really like that. So yeah, it's kind of like a mini. I mean, at some point, you know, and I guess maybe that's maybe that's a good thing, is right. You start off with this little lance, and then it grows, and then maybe that just grows into, eventually you would get to be Band of the Hawk if you wanted. Now, if you wanted to be Guts, I mean, even Guts has, what do they call him, like because he has his crew, like the Hunters, or I don't know, whatever his crew is, Gutsman. I don't know whatever his little group is called. Like he has his own. I don't think they emphasize it too much, but he has like his own group inside his like Hawks Raiders or something, or Guts's Raiders, something like that. So he does have his own. Because I was gonna say, if you wanted to be like Guts and be like a man alone, but the reality is that he wasn't a man alone for a while, and you can even argue that afterwards he kind of agglomerates people on him, kind of in a similar thing, like someone like Guts, right? Even though he's not trying to, he's got that little fairy, I forget the name, that follows him around. He ends up getting all these people following him, even though he's not really trying to. It's kind of for hook or by crook. They just sort of show up and they're there. And that's kind of similar to this thing. It's like, yeah, you're not trying to get these people here or these things here, but you're getting them. And you could have a lot of fun with this list. Like, I just went with kind of the default, you know, it, like in like Guts's thing, maybe you go, well, he ends up getting like a druid type. Doesn't one of the I forget who ends up, he meets up, follows him around, is like he has some kind of caster, but he gets the fairy. Like, you know, you could get like, I just stuck with these kind of very vanilla, low to the ground default classes. But you don't have to. You could totally find, if you wanted to, hey, I want to have a pixie that follows him around, and that's just the way I want to roll. Like, you could totally go on and make these things, like you want to make it less prescriptive, or make it more like, hey, you can quest for them at certain levels. Maybe the squire you just get. I feel like the squire you could just get, but maybe you get up that 4th level, you can quest for somebody special. Like, if you want a pixie, or you want whatever, maybe you want to make it some kind of animal, like an intelligent animal. Like, you can have a lot of fun. You can go totally, you know, into your setting, campaign, however gonzo you want to get to. But it was just interesting, actually, Drew, for bringing up, or whoever brought up Berserk, because that is interesting, right? Because I think of Guts anyway, just to look at his character as this kind of loner, but he's not. And he didn't mean to. And it's kind of a similar thing. If you want to look at, well, what about the fighter who doesn't want people around? It's like, Guts still has people around, even though he's probably asked them at certain times to go away, leave him alone. You know, you're only going to get hurt if you're with me. And yet they're still kind of hanging around. Guts been world's toughest attorney. He would be. Yeah, he gets, Drew says he gets a fairy and a cleric. Yeah. Raid says it has to tell us. Yeah, I mean, there's some rough parts of Berserk for sure. Even, yeah, there's definitely some elements that are not. I don't want to go there. I don't love that part of it, but I do, as a whole, I think it's really incredible. But yeah, there's definitely some stuff that was like, I wish I could go another way. But I feel that way about so much, like anime manga stuff, where I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm like, oh, why'd you know? Can we not do that? But, you know, it's just not to my taste sometimes. What are you going to do? Yeah, posse in a Western, right. You know, I don't know how it worked in real life, but, you know, it just, you know, with like, you know, a Billy the Kid type or somebody, but, you know, you see this guy coming down the street or into town, got some kind of confidence about him, clearly got a little pep in their step, got some muscle, they've been around, maybe you've seen them leave and come back, right? And you're like, man, that guy's got it together. I'm going to follow that guy because it's better than farming dirt or whatever the heck I'm doing out here. So yeah, I mean, I think it works. I think the big thing, and I'm repeating myself at this point, but the big thing I don't want to drag in from retainers is the dependence on charisma. I don't want it to be a charisma thing. This is totally about your class and your class level for your fighter. This is not about your charisma. And like I said, and I said this before, some little bug. Charisma, you know, still with reactions being, to my mind, super important. Having bonuses to reaction rolls is really great. So I don't feel like taking that part away from charisma if we were to do it across the board with retainers or just for this. I don't feel like that's some kind of heretical. Well, I mean, some people probably would find it heretical, but I don't think it's a terrible thing. Charisma gets enough. Got not a lot of charisma gets a lot of love with that kind of thing. I would do this separately. We got any last bits? Bits, bobs, bloobs? Anyone got anything else going on? Like I said, I don't think I'm going to be doing any gaming. It would be awesome if I get my cousins to game, but I don't know. I don't really have. Well, I can't say I don't have books here because I got tons of books here, but I don't know what I have that I could run if they wanted to play. I'm not running 5th edition. I'm not running Temple of Elemental Evil. I'm not running 3rd edition. I got stuff that's off camera that I need to go through, but I haven't yet. I got Deadlands, but I haven't even read that one yet. What is this? I don't think I've even read this yet. I don't even know. What is this? This is the Fantasy Role-Playing Gamer's Bible. I don't know. Did I get this? Did I bid on this? Did I get it at something? I don't even know where this came from. Sean Patrick Fannin. I haven't read it yet. I have no idea what it has. I'll have to check it out. I don't think it's not a system. I think it's just stuff about systems. And then I've got Hyperborea, which I still need to read through. Haven't done that yet. And I don't have Drew's book here because it's in Studio A, waiting to be read. What the heck? I got so much stuff here. Ooh, this might be fun. I'll have to check this out. Warfare in the Classical World. Ooh, delicious. I got a lot of stuff floating around. Too much stuff. Let's see. Ooh, I missed some stuff here. Drew says, I think you could scale the warrior by having them wield the power of death in a mystic way. Like eventually they were able to cheat death and reverse it in various ways. But now I'm just riffing. Yeah, I mean the one thing is like one of the reasons why I like this idea is that I don't want to turn the fighter into like an Eldritch Knight or like a magic user type. So this way is a little bit of a cheat, right? Because they're getting access to low level magic, but they're still not wink wink nudge nudge a magic user because we have this little paper wall that says I'm asking my follower to cast that spell. I'm not casting that spell myself. I think some of that stuff like death, defying, whatever, if you were playing like a Eastern themed game where you have more like Shaolin martial arts type stuff or like wuxia type things, and I don't know much about wuxia other than I love the movies, but I don't know all the greater fiction stuff, then those ideas of like some of those things kind of maybe come more to the fore if you're getting into more of the spiritual angle. But that's not really my default. Raid says that a crew gives you something to spend money on too with getting them equipped. Yeah, there's like equipping them. There's that kind of, it becomes part of your expenses, your sort of living expenses. So you can, I wouldn't want it to be too onerous a money sink because I wouldn't want to dissuade them, from doing it. I mean, obviously I'd always want to give them the choice if they didn't want to go down this route. I do not want these people. Green eggs and ham, I do not want them, Sam, I am. Fine. Right? I'm not shoving them down your throat. But I wouldn't want to make the kind of costs and things so onerous that it's like, well, I just can't because it's stupid. Like, I got to live like a pauper because I got to take care of my 5 guys. Like, I'd want to figure out some way. But you could also, like, I would be happy to also build in this progression. Again, building that kind of domain element stuff. Maybe tying it in with this kind of taking an oath. Like a domain. Kind of maybe we, like this becomes kind of a domain, a domain pathway. Right? Where these things come together to eventually get you some kind of road to a domain kind of dealio. Maybe there's something like that. This is how this ultimately looks. that there's just more of this kind of progression down. Let's see. So Drew likes O's. And then Terrence says, you can non-magicize the sort of thing. Lucky for me, that guy stabbed me in my whiskey flask. I mean, the cheating death part, yeah, I mean, to a degree you can, depending on what it is, right? That kind of becomes down to, well, if it was being stabbed, but then if it was like, if you finger of death me, I don't know if you could say, well, they actually finger of death my whiskey flask, whatever. I mean, you could probably come up with it, but like I said, I don't want to turn it too much into now they're like arcane beings. So whatever it would be, if we were going to do some kind of death defying, I'd want it to be like because of your steely resolve or your will to live or your fate. You were not fated to die yet, Sir Knight. And so the finger of death just fizzles off. Something like that, right? I don't want it to be, because sometimes it gets goofy. Like in to a lesser degree, like someone put a comment about that DC 20 saying about the charismatic fighter. And, because I was saying like there was a little bit of a disconnect at the time for me with some of these, any attribute becoming like your to hit modifier. Some of them make some sense. Some of them don't make as much sense. And someone responded and, saying, hey, well, what if your charisma was like your intuition? And I thought, that's a bit of a stretch, right? But you're going to have those stretches sometimes. And it's a matter of you and your game if you want to say that this thing is a stretch. But I or not. But I don't want the core fighter. I want the core fighter to be this kind of non-arcane being. And if you can make these things work without that kind of dribbling in that way, for me anyway, that's kind of what I'm looking for. Obviously, for you could do, it's all up to you. So if I was going to give them something like Death Defying, it would have to be something that felt non-arcane, if that makes sense. But, we can come up, fate, your whatever, your willpower. Death fingered the armor-dwelling ferret. Yes. Oh, Beastmaster and the two ferrets? Sure. How did didn't the one ferret get thrown in the fire? Am I remembering the end of Beastmaster? And spoilers from a Mark Singer movie from 1984? I suppose. But yeah, that's why you have two ferrets. So I always have two ferrets so that you could throw one in a fire pit. Because I got to watch that movie again. Beastmaster. That's a good one. Is that where the animal companions really took off from? Or was that ranger trope already kind of there? Not that Beastmaster was necessarily a ranger, but he was kind of wandering the land, sort of like a ranger. And then he had those pets. Though he can also kind of communicate with animals that they don't show him bonding with any animals, right? I don't think so. Or does he? Is he able to just... Because he doesn't... I don't think they ever show him a situation where he's talking to rats or something like that, right? It's always... It's always his buddies. I don't know. I should try to watch that. Is it on cable? I wonder if it's on cable. Or, sorry, streaming. Gosh, why did I say cable? I mean, we still have... I don't have cable TV here at Studio Baby. We actually still have cable TV at home. But it's funny, I was thinking like cable. Like, seems like for almost everybody these days. Well, I know people still have cable, but it's almost like a generational thing, I feel like. Drew says, pets in fantasy have always been staring each other down. Yeah, but there are certain tropes that kind of came out. Like the original ranger was Aragorn, right? Who had no pets. He was just a guy. I mean, they called him a ranger, and there was obviously army rangers. And I think there is some influence there because Aragorn was really good in the outdoors, but he wasn't like he was good indoors too. I mean, he wasn't like just an outdoorsman, but the ranger kind of became an outdoorsman. Oh, Tara says bets it's on Tubi. Probably. But I'd be curious. I don't know. It probably predates Beastmaster, but I wonder what it was. I'm sure someone somewhere has done a write-up of the history of the Ranger class. Because, like I said, the first version, which is in, I don't know, in early Dragon magazines, is not a pets thing. You're literally, I mean, it literally is Aragorn the class. You're basically, you're like a paladin. You're really a kind of a paladin. And you have the same kind of limitations as paladins. And you sort of wander the lands like Cain. No, it's not, you're not a kind of a druidy pet guy. And then sometime later, AD&D, is the AD&D Ranger now at that point, is it a, I don't even know, is the AD&D Ranger a thing? I mean, I know it's, I mean, sorry, I didn't mean it's a thing. I know it's there, but is it a pets guy? All right, let's see. Someone, what? Holy cow! When was? Look at this website. I'm just gonna throw over here. Holy moly! This thing is like. When the heck was this site built? And why does it have weird crud? What does it say? Multiverse. If you get hypnotized and start sending your money somewhere, I apologize. Oh, okay. So this is first edition AD&D. All right, Ranger, subclass of fighter, scouting. All right, scouting and tracking. Yeah, they got fighters. Okay. Rangers must be good. Okay. So against certain giant class opponents, they add, all right, so they get extra towards giants, which still to me could be like an Aragorn sort of thing. All right, so they get a druidic spell at 8th level, a magic user spell at 9th level. So they get druid stuff and magic user stuff. Huh. Yeah, it doesn't say anything. Yeah, this is definitely some internet. Doesn't say anything else. Let's see, what does Wikipedia have a good entry? Yeah. All right, AD&D. Yep, okay, we got that part. We got the tracking, got that, but there's still not the pets. Okay, so second edition. Now they're getting more thief-like stuff. All right, here we go. They got animal empathy in second edition. In third edition. Oh, wait a minute. They say it was. Hold on a minute. Rangers also gain animal empathy, which allowed them to calm, frighten, or hostile animals. Okay. Okay, here it is. So, second edition, they start to be able to recruit various woodland animals. What year did second edition come out? All right, so Beastmaster wow, 82. That's earlier than I thought. All right, Beastmaster came out in 82. Second edition came out well after that. I'm just wondering. I'm sure it's not this. But clearly, AD&D and prior, Rangers were kind of had a little bit of outdoorsiness and stuff, but they didn't have the pets part. Second edition, they get pets. And I'm curious where that change... Curious what the change came from. Not really directly relevant to anything we've been discussing, but still fun. Oh, look at that. And this is your reminder to go watch Beastmaster. Oh, that old guy. I forgot about him. Are they going to show the eye? Oh, there he is. The Beastmaster, yes. Oh, it's the tiger that they painted to be a panther. I thought these guys are really cool. These they don't show them. Maybe they want to save that as a spoiler. But the winged, oh yeah, boy, rest in peace, Tanya Roberts and Rip Torn. They're the ferrets. Didn't they make a second one? Way later. I don't even remember that one. I don't think it was very good. Oh look, he looks. Oh boy. 91. So 9 years later. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Dar is a warrior who could talk to the beasts. He's forced to travel to Earth to stop his evil brother from stealing an atomic bomb. Oh, oh my gosh. I'm gonna have to check this one out. Where is this one? I remember that it came out. I remember that it existed. I do not remember seeing this at all. Did they show where is this playing? This has got to be somewhere. Where does it? Isn't there something? I hate the fact that all the streaming services don't put out some kind of list where you can see what's playing where, or am I missing some tool that everybody has? Where is this playing? I'm just gonna have to do some searches because that sounds too good. I mean, bad, but good. Oh yeah, Terrence. Oh, look at that. Oh, this is like a good double feature: the Masters of the Universe movie, and Beastmaster 2. Oh, of course, he's in Hollywood. Oh my gosh, incredible! Who are the stars here? Carrie Wurr, interesting. Did she pass too? Hate to be. No, she didn't. No, I was thinking of somebody else. Andre Norton. Who else is starring in this wonderful movie? So it's Mark Singer, Carrie Wurst, I don't know, Wings Hauser. Oh, nice. Oh, Wings Hauser, always a favorite. Anybody else of note? I don't think so. Well, I can't go out on a higher note than Beastmaster 2. Drew says that the natural progression of the fighter is to become the king of some sort, if successful, or second to a king on par with a wizard, arcane. Yeah, I agree with that, Drew. I definitely think that's kind of though I always felt it'd be cool if you could have a couple different paths, just to acknowledge that not every player wants to play a king or go to that level, and not every party wants to engage with domain play. I mean, the party that I'm in, we have a couple of us who could be on beyond that domain path, and they just have not chosen to do it yet, and no one's really, or we're waiting for something. I mean, there's reasons, right? It just kind of hasn't come up yet. So I always thought it'd be neat to have some different paths. Like, hey, you want to go domain path? Here's that path. And we could put some things in here to reward you for that, for making progress on that. Or if you don't want to, here's some other things you could do so that you don't just not losing out because you decide you don't want to, or because it just doesn't match the party. If you're out adventuring and doing that stuff and you're having fun, you don't want to start making it like you shouldn't be doing that, Terrence says, Wings Hauser, when a casting director really needs a professional jerk. He's a professional. Hey, man, his brother, what's his brother's name? Cole Hauser, man. He's had that kind of resurgence with Yellowstone, but I always liked him in things like Pitch Black and some other movies. So shout out to the Hausers. All right, folks. I think my fam should be getting here relatively soon. And like I said, Beastmaster 2, the height of cinema. No better place to stop than that. So I will probably stream on Monday, but I'm going to enjoy tomorrow. I hope you do the same. Good night, or good whatever day or night you may end up watching or listening to this. Game on, everybody. Talk to you later. Bye now.